Hello, howdy, hey! Welcome to the first episode of Season 2 of the RevOps Show. We have missed you all during our little break, but we are back and kicking off this season strong with an episode geared towards bad metrics and figuring out what metrics you should be paying attention to. There's a lot to unpack here as Doug and Jess talk about SaaS companies, public versus private companies, and the dangers to strictly following the trending metrics. So with that being said, let's get ready to RevOps.
Jess,
Doug,
I'm stoked.
Doug.
I'm stoked.
Wow, we're just coming out of the gate hot.
Jess, how could you not be more excited than what is about to happen right now? It is a new year.
It is.
And a new season.
It is a new season. Season 2.
Season 2. Yes. Season 1 went about, 30 months, 24 months, whatever.
Something like that. Yeah.
I think what we do is I have a random number generator here. And I just run a random number. And that's how many months each season.
That's not what we're doing. We took a much needed break.
I have to admit, it was a sad time for me.
I know you were sad. I know you're always sad when we can't RevOps show.
How did you get through the holiday without a RevOps show? Without a new RevOps show?
I barely.
So I have been avoiding asking you a question for quite some time, actually.
Oh boy.
Because this year's kind of a big year for you.
It is.
You know what happened on January 1st?
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
See, went somewhere else, didn't I?
You did. We need to give some space to me for the next 10 months, is all I'm saying. We need to honor the next 10 months.
See, you almost gave something away.
I did.
You didn't have to.
I did.
You know what happened January 1st, don't you?
January 1st this year?
This year?
What?
Steamboat Willie's in public domain.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah. So a bunch of terrible, terrible Mickey Mouse horror movies are going to be made.
And Tigger, too.
Mm-hmm.
So the Winnie the Pooh horror is going to have a sequel because Tigger's going to get to join.
It's just blasphemy is all I'm going to say. People are awful.
Jess, this is what it means, though. We can start utilizing Steamboat Willie in our work.
Yeah, because that's just befitting. That's total fit.
Like, don't you think we should take the RevOps Show logo and work Steamboat Willie into that logo?
I absolutely think we should. Let's get on that right now.
So how do you feel about Steamboat being in the public domain?
I mean,
have you talked about it on your Disney podcast yet?
I have not. We have not talked about it. Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I think you don't like it. I think that's where you come.
Well, so I don't like when people do stupid shit, like creating a horror movie with it. Like, I just don't. Like, leave it alone. It's like that's kind of sacred. So I'm not mad about it being in public domain. I don't like if people are going to make a mockery of it, and that's why I'm bothered.
Now, if you think about this week, I foreshadowed this topic. Do you recall the foreshadowing?
Doug, this week has been a hell of a month, and that's all I'm going to tell you.
So I often will find a GIF, a GIF, a riff, whatever the damn thing's called, to share as my way of saying good morning.
Yes.
Jess, I know you look forward to it every day.
I do. I didn't get one this morning, but I do look forward to it every day.
I was a little tired this morning.
I figured.
Do you remember the GIF that I used on January 2nd?
I'm looking for it right now. I do not. It is Steamboat Willie. There we go. Here we go.
See, I gave you plenty of warning to be prepared for this topic.
You did.
Last thought on this topic.
Mm-hmm.
You remember? Do they still call it Paradise Island?
Are you talking about Pleasure Island at
Pleasure
Disney
Island.
World?
Did I say Paradise Island? That's a completely different thing. Sorry.
It is not. It was called Pleasure Island. Yeah.
Pleasure Island.
That's where.
Do they still? Yeah. Is it still called Pleasure Island?
It's not called that anymore. It is now called Disney Springs.
Right. Okay. So when it was called Pleasure Island.
Yeah, where it was more nightclubs, which is not what it so much is anymore.
It was just bars. Yeah. And so I went there because my sister lived in Orlando, moved from Orlando. She's back in Orlando. But back when I was in my 20s, I was down for business, visited, and we were in Pleasure Island. And I came up with what I thought would be the best-selling T-shirt in the history of Disney World.
Oh, boy.
And the thing is, today I could do it.
Okay.
And it was going to be Mickey Mouse chugging a beer.
There it is. Yep.
Pleasure Island. That would have been a good T-shirt.
That would have sold. Yeah, 100%. I agree. I mean, I think that would be a great shirt for Epcot. Like,
that's what I'm saying. But do they do characters in Epcot?
Well, that's where most of the characters are in Epcot. If you're looking for characters, that's where you go. Come listen to my other podcast.
But isn't that weird?
It is very weird. Well, so the reason is because it's more for adults. So what do you do with the kids? Like when we went character hunting with kids because there's not as much for the kids to do in Epcot as there is in, say, Magic Kingdom. So I think it's to occupy the children.
Wait, I'm confused. Why wouldn't the kids drink around the world?
It's a great question. And on that note,
I mean, they would sleep that night.
They would sleep great.
They would sleep.
You might be arrested the next day, but I digress.
You can't be. It was Epcot. That's what you're supposed to do. We're in the Magic Kingdom. I know it's not officially the Magic Kingdom Park, but the kingdom is still magical.
You're still in the most magical place on Earth.
All right, Jess, what are we talking about this week? In episode 1 of season 2, I don't even know what episode number we're on.
I don't think either of us know what.
Do you think we're going to make it to 100 total episodes?
I think so. I think we're pretty close to 100.
I'm committed.
You're committed. Okay.
I'm committed.
Well, as long as you're committed, Doug.
Oh, you want to know where I am? You want to know where I am on something? So I walk a lot. Been hitting my move. I hit my move goal every day, and so I finally needed a target. So I decided I wanted to break Cal Ripken Jr.'s streak. Cal Ripken played 2,632 days. I'm sorry, played 2,632 games in a row.
Yep.
I am less than 2 weeks away from 2,632 consecutive days every day
of hitting your move goal. Yeah. There you go.
I mean, granted, I set my move goal at 50 calories. I did not, everybody.
Okay,
Alrighty, what
Doug.
are we talking about? What are we talking about?
Today, we're talking about dangerous metrics.
Yep. Yep. So I was talking with one of our clients yesterday before.
Yesterday before. Okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a combination of yesterday and the day before. I can't remember which one of those days.
Okay.
And he was talking about, I mean, this is a very large, very complicated, multiple companies, business lines within there. And he was talking about the concern of, if we make it work for everybody, does it work for anybody? And there's a difference between that being anarchy, like everybody has it their way, as opposed to like this business unit has this process, that business unit has that process. And I was explaining to them how we manage that because his statement was, look, will I be able to get, well, I think he said, well, I have an accurate pipeline report. Mm-hmm. To which I replied, you'll have an aligned pipeline report. And the point there is that's never accurate. Like that's one of the things you have to understand about your data is it's never accurate. But what I brought up to him was that reporting serves two functions. It's like, what do you mean? And I said, and when I say reporting and analytics, there's two jobs, and they are They are separate, they are distinct, and far more than not, they are conflicting. Yep. One job is to provide insights and the ability to identify areas of improvement.
Yep.
The other job, and it is a distinctly different job, is to tell a story.
Yep.
Right. And so it's like, will we be able to report to the board? Will we be able to report to our private equity? Will we be able to? Right. And it's like, okay, right. So those two jobs, what will I be able to report to my board is a different job than will I be getting the insights that I need so that we can be continuously improving?
Yep.
And so it is very important that you understand when you're looking at metrics and you're designing what your metrics are, what your dashboards are, et cetera, that you understand what the job of those reports are. And the reason I bring this up is while this show is geared for far more than people in SaaS, whether you're in SaaS or out of SaaS, the SaaS industry sucks up so much oxygen these days that they have become kind of a benchmark for the metrics that they have. And the ones that really lead the way are public companies, right? Because you don't see what the private companies are doing or saying or how. And so if you take a look at the history of SaaS, you'll see as they've gone through phases of what we refer to as the growth life cycle, you'll see that they keep introducing this new metric that becomes the metric that everybody follows until the next metric. And when you actually look at those metrics, what you're going to learn is, those were the story metrics. And if you look at where I think SaaS is finding itself, yesterday I shared on LinkedIn, I coined a new term. At least I think it's new. Had you heard of it? Have you heard the term before? SaaSflation?
I had never heard the term before. That was new to me.
SaaSflation. Can we get that filed with copyright? I want to charge people. I'm going to charge 2 cents every time someone uses it. And look, here's the thing you have to understand about SaaS, and the thing you have to understand when you're looking at high growth companies, super high growth companies, there's a Ponzi element to what they're doing. There is an underlying when you're playing high growth and you're playing to valuation, you're selling at artificially low prices. And one of the things that's happening, it's not the focus of the episode today, but it is something that I think people need to be prepared for, is the underlying models of SaaS companies were flawed from a profitability standpoint. They were built for high growth because growth is what drove valuation. Growth is what drove the story that they needed to tell the analysts, so the analysts would tell the investors, and the investors would buy the stock and continue to own the stock. Right. And what happened is those metrics became the Bible of how are we doing, and it's causing lots of problems.
What kind of problems is it causing?
Lots of them.
Lots of them.
Lots and lots. What kind of problems is it causing? Well, how tired are people today?
I mean, I'm exhausted. No, people are tired.
I mean, you deal with our vendors. You see it. You see our customers, right?
Yeah.
Why is this company doing so well? Why are the tech bros all out there telling the story of tech freedom and then saying the problem with the US is in China, they're happy to work 200 hours a week?
Yeah.
Is it possible to work 200 hours a week? I don't know that it is.
But I think
someone has said that. I mean, Elon Musk has literally said that Elon Musk, I'm pretty sure Bill Ackman, Ray Dalio have all said, well, the advantage that the Chinese has is no one there is complaining about a 10 or 12 hour workday. Like, well, wait a second. If this is supposed to bring all this freedom, if you take a look at Uber was a complete sabotaging the provider to provide an artificially low to justify, because the way they're getting monetized, the way they make their money, it's like owning a sports team, right? You don't own a sports team because you're looking to make annual profits. You buy a sports team because whatever you buy it for, you are highly, highly likely to sell it for a whole lot more
Yeah.
Right. And the difficulty there is when you take a look at that equity game, what you find is high Pareto distribution curves. So they're benefiting a small portion of the people that are creating that. And by the way, if you take a look at the washout rates of what happens in venture funded companies and so forth, this same thing is happening, right? And so I'm a VP of sales. I'm looking at this. We're using these metrics. Like, one of the challenges is I start believing that, so we start talking about net revenue retention. That's the one I'm going to really hit on today.
Yep.
We talk about net revenue retention, and we start believing net revenue retention, and we don't understand what is net revenue retention telling us and what is it not telling us, right? And so we fall into this pattern of look at my net revenue retention, and because we end up confusing the map with the model, right? I'm sorry, the map with the territory. We confuse the model with reality. You follow me?
Well, what do you mean by we confuse the model with reality? So we can tell me more about that.
So the map is not the territory.
Right.
Like I looked on a map. I know everything about this. I could walk the city blindfolded because I've really studied this map.
Right.
Right. No, you can't do that. No, I've studied the topography. Like, there's always something there that's not actually represented. Right. It is a model. It is a simplified construct.
Okay.
Right. And so we get mad at weather forecasters because the weather forecasters, though technically it's actually impossible for a weather forecast to be wrong.
Because it's a forecast?
No. Because has there ever been a 0%, like truly a 0% chance of rain or a 100% chance of rain?
Right.
There's a 10% chance of rain today. It rains. Oh, the weather forecast is wrong. No, technically it was not wrong. They said there was a 10% chance. Okay, so we go, because what's happening is we're looking at the model and we're saying the model is the reality. Now, the model by definition is a simplified element. It's being brought down into algorithms. When the system is a complex ecosystem with things in a constant state of flux and so forth. Right. And then we begin to believe that and we start making decisions based on that. And then we get, Jim Collins, the one, probably the greatest. I can't say he discovered it, but his research pointed it out. And it's the takeaway from all of Collins' stuff that I actually find the most value in, which is the first sign of failure and the number one cause of failure is success. Now, on one hand, it's kind of trite. Because if you don't have success, can you really call it failure? But the point is, when you become when you hit that point of success, two things happen. By the way, this also hits the innovator's dilemma. Number one is you now have something to defend. You have something to lose, so you start defending. Right. And this goes to our multitude of conversations where we talk about data that stimulates thinking is good, data that replaces thinking is not good. So we start looking at data with an objective to defend.
Right.
And especially when you're at that point of success, it's actually pretty easy to find the data that supports what you're doing is the right thing. And so you become increasingly certain in what you're doing, blinding yourself to what is changing. And because you confuse the model with reality, go back many years ago, Long-Term Capital Group. This was basically the 2008 banking crisis before the 2008 banking crisis. This hedge fund that was started by like 6 Nobel laureates that had, the most advanced statistical models, backward tested to withstand up to a 6 standard deviation event. Right. So again, high levels of certainty. So they went in, did something like leveraged in an area that typically doesn't have a huge impact on things, right? A 6 standard deviation event is a very, very rare event. Leveraged up. But what they forgot is 6 standard deviation events do happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened.
Yeah.
And it almost brought down the entire financial system. Right. Those are happening in microcosms all the time. Take a look at the performance of underlying SaaS companies. By the way, if you're going to jump into a SaaS product, and I would say if you're jumping into any product where you're going to be working with that company, you expect to be working with that company for a sustained period of time, it's important that you understand their business model. Not because you need to analyze their business model, but if I'm going to work with you for a long period of time, and so I'm going to build, like I'm going to use you as my CRM, you're going to become my central nervous system. I'm building everything on you. And I haven't realized, okay, how are you making money? How does this work? What's going to happen? Well, once I'm now fully on and I got everything in there, I lose all my leverage.
Yep.
Right? You start raising prices. I can't do anything about it. I can get mad. Right? And by the way, we're seeing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's happening when your model's bad is you go from value exploration and even value exploitation to value extraction. So value exploration is something new comes out. We solve a new problem. We solve an old problem a new way. Hey, wow, have you seen this? This is freaking awesome. Holy cow. Lots and lots and lots of love. Now, the difficulty with value exploration is it's really bumpy, right?
Right.
It's new. That's why you're getting your early adopters. That's the disruptive element. So to be disruptive, you have to be value explorative. You are creating new levels of value. And so people are willing to accept the disruption. Because by the way, when I take a new solution that solves something in a new way or whatever, it is going to disrupt what I'm doing. There is a cost to that. But it's worth it because this is giving me an advantage. Now I want to count on it. And that's when we go into value exploitation, right? We've generated something new and it's now far more of a repeat.
Right. Yeah.
Right. That lets a much larger market come onto it because, hey, we can count on it. It works, it works, it works, it works. The challenge is if you're not truly doing value exploration, right? Which is very customer centric, and it's easy to fool yourself into customer centricity. And by the way, one of the great ways to do that is with these metrics. You move into value extraction, and here's a really good way to begin to tell when a company's moved to value extraction. And by the way, value extraction is not win-win.
So why do you say it's not win-win?
Because there is no value that's actually being created. What I'm doing is I'm extracting.
Okay.
So value exploration is I'm actually creating more value than I'm gaining.
Because I'm learning and I'm improving because I'm right.
But also I'm giving you something brand new. I'm charging for it. There's a whole bunch of things that come into that.
Right.
Value exploitation is where we get into that. Okay, there's a balance.
Right.
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 Value extraction is like Spirit Airlines does value extraction. They sell you an airline ticket, right? And they go, "Oh, you want a seat?"
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Someone comes out, usage fees. I mean, look. I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it out. HubSpot raising Sales Hub from $120 to $150. That was value extraction. What did you bring? Why did they raise it? They raised it for two reasons. They had to. Well, why'd they have to? Well, goes back to the model.
Right.
And the second reason is because they could.
Because they could. Yep.
By the way, why did they not raise it $50? $50 probably begins to hurt a little bit too much in terms of right. So the way you know is that, so that's why I call it value extraction, because, and here's how you know that a company is moving to value extraction, and that is you hear the word monetize.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if you could put bugs into a company and just have a system count how many times the word monetize is brought up, the growth rate of the word monetize, my hypothesis is the growth rate of the word monetize being used would correlate almost directly with the move to value extraction.
Yep.
And it's the data that puts us in the position. It's the metrics that are putting companies in the position to make that happen.
So you talked about net revenue retention as one of the metrics that SaaS likes, pays attention to, plays with, however you want to phrase it. What are some of the other metrics that you see them using frequently?
Let's talk about how we got to net revenue retention.
Okay.
Because if we go back a long time ago, in a galaxy far away, 1998, 1999, the internet bubble, of which SaaS is just a continuation. Pets.com. Do you have customers? No, you don't have any. No, we don't have customers. We have eyeballs.
Right.
We have people visiting our website. We are going to monetize eyeballs.
Yep.
By the way, I know that sounds stupid. Unicorns went public because they were going to monetize eyeballs. Okay, then it became customer growth. How many customers do you have? Because remember, this whole thing of free became a thing.
Yep.
Right?
I remember.
Well, how do you make money if it's free? We're bringing in customers. And so the number that told you how was the company doing was customer growth.
Right.
Right? But you know what the name of our company is, Jess?
It's Lyft.
It is. So we forget that there's this thing called science in science. And so there's a science to growth.
Yeah.
If we want growth, we need momentum. We need velocity. And we need trajectory. Basically speaking, do you know what that's called? It's called lift. And what is Bernoulli's principle of lift? Bernoulli's principle is when the rate of wind above the wing is greater than the rate below, you create a vacuum that pulls up.
Right.
Right. So what happened was we have customer growth. Customer growth starts to slow down. So what happens? Oh, take a look at our revenue.
Right.
And it became revenue growth. Yep, got it. Well, no shit, your revenue growth is growing. But here's what I can tell you. If your revenue growth is growing faster than your customer growth, probably not sustainable.
Yeah.
When your customer growth is growing faster than your revenue growth, you're creating lift because you need the customer before you have revenue.
Sure.
So it's like, 5 years later, customer growth starts slowing down. We need a story to tell. So we start talking about revenue. And by the way, you're asking for revenue. Here's our revenue. Okay, revenue growth. What came next? Churn. When's the last time? I don't hear people talk about churn. I mean, yes, they use the word churn, but they don't talk about churn like they talk about churn.
No, churn rates was like huge like 5 years ago. It was massive.
Churn.
Yeah.
What's the lifetime of your average customer? Lifetime of your average customer. That was the question. Today, the question is lifetime value.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You go, what's the difference? Lifetime of the customer is an inversion of churn.
Right.
Right.
How long do I have the customer? Yeah.
Right. The customer. Well, guess what happened? So by the way, if you have a 33% churn rate, which is if you're in a recurring revenue business, like you're dead. Mathematically speaking, what's your churn rate for the first 3 years?
100%.
No. Zero.
Zero? Oh, for the first 3. Okay, gotcha. Now, okay. Yes. Zero. Yes.
Or maybe it's the first 2 years, but you get my point.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
My average lifetime is 3 years.
Right.
Right. So for the first 2 or 3 years, my churn rate is really low. Because if my churn rate's 33% in the first year, I got a problem. Like, that's not going to average 3 years.
Right.
When you actually bring in a compounding element, et cetera. Right. So for your, and so when your churn rate begins to, so let's just say average customer of 5 years, which again is a 20% churn rate, which anyone in a subscription business would tell you is bad. For the first 5 years, as you're ramping up your sales, you've got lots of sales coming in the front door and a trickle in the back door.
Yep.
So all of a sudden, now I have 1,000 customers. I'm bringing in 200 customers a year. I have 1,000 customers now, right? And so now in year 5, I'm oversimplifying this. Now in year 5, I sell 200 customers, but 200 customers leave. I'm at 0%. I have zero customer growth.
Yep.
Right. So we went from revenue growth to the next one was customer retention. Look at our retention rate. But then customer retention rate kind of wasn't telling the story.
Right.
But look at what our customers are paying. We're generating, and this is my favorite term in it, negative. We have negative churn rates. That's what we started here. Negative churn rates. There's no such thing as negative churn rates. And thankfully they changed it to net revenue retention, which is how much revenue are my customers producing greater than where they started. So year over year from your existing customer base. And by the way, so as I'm moving through the maturity scale, right? I'm moving to larger customers. If I'm not getting larger customers, if I'm not getting larger deals, that's going to represent a problem. So I lose some customers, but those 3 customers that I lost are less than the new customer that I added. Plus, by the way, if I am serving somebody, they're going to use us more.
Right.
Like, I got news for you. If your customers aren't paying more to you over time, that's a problem. It's not that congratulations, you're doing great. That's a problem. Right.
Yep.
And so of course you're going to have that. And now you take a look at if you take a look at the financial reports of SaaS companies over the last year, it tells a fascinating story. They're maintaining their growth rate. I'm sorry, they're maintaining their stock price because they're still getting enough growth. They're still showing enough growth, right? But here's what you need to understand if you have a subscription business. ABC company is a $1 billion SaaS company. 70 to 80% of their 2024 performance is locked in. Right? There's not a lot they can do to change their 2024 performance. Because remember, in October, when they land a new piece of business, that only counts for 3 months. It only generates 3 months of revenue because they have to accrue the revenue. So where we're seeing that, look at these companies, they're meeting their revenue expectations, they're meeting their earning expectations. Yeah, because what happened was, you look at the customer growth that happened post-pandemic, the whole thing that drove all that up.
Yep.
That brought us a wave that we're now just getting through.
Yep.
And you take a look at, and I don't want to call any companies out, but if you take a look at companies that have never not grown quarter over quarter are predicting 0 growth in revenue.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And by the way, that is a problem. And so what do they need to do? What they're doing, they need to continue to promise that growth. And by the way, growth comes in 2 places. It's either the revenue growth that's going to drive the future value, or they're going to talk about margins, operating margins. And you see all this focus now because, by the way, you can't grow like you used to. Do you know who one of the best growth SaaS companies in history has been? Salesforce. What is Salesforce's primary growth strategy? And this is not to say that their core business has not had organic growth, because it absolutely has. But I would tell you that Salesforce, for all the things that it does, I think when you look at it historically, what you're going to say about Salesforce is they were one of the best acquirer of businesses in history.
Yeah.
I will say that about Microsoft too. Microsoft is probably the best acquirer of businesses in history. That's where their growth came from.
Yeah.
And so Adobe buys Figma. And by the way, the upside of buying Figma is Figma's a small company. There are a whole bunch of people complaining because in the government's rejection of that ended up breaking up the deal. It was, I think, the first time, or a rare time, where the evidence wasn't it's anti-competitive now, like they're competitive now. It was that it could be anti-competitive. And everyone was complaining about that. All right. Except that when you look at the underlying scheme here, Figma brings that earlier stage growth. Figma's in the scale stage. Figma's moving from value exploitation from value exploration into value exploitation. It brings a new level of growth that gives Adobe a pump of growth without actually doing anything. Right. Which, by the way, now takes Figma out of the game in terms of disrupting what Adobe might do, etc. Guess what, tech and SaaS companies? Welcome to adulthood. Right.
Right.
Manufacturers have had to deal with this for 50 years.
Right.
Railroad companies have had to deal with this for 120 years. Right. Everyone loves capitalism except when they hold it against me.
Right.
Right. And so now suddenly acquisition isn't the easy play.
Yeah.
Right. And so you bring that underlying element into it, and all of a sudden now, what's the truth? Now this plays down in a micro fashion, right? Hey, we're looking at our growth rate, our customer growth rate. Look at this. Look at our revenue growth rate, right? And what we're not doing is identifying where is the vulnerability. What do we have to do? How, like when we're in that growth element. Mm-hmm. And by the way, this show is geared to private companies.
Right.
Right. We're not in the public markets. It might be private equity owned, but we're still in the private markets where I still like to think that profits matter. What we need to be thinking about is, okay, where's the vulnerability that could hurt us? So we've got growth, we've got profitability right now. Well, how do we start solving the problems that we're going to have 18 months from now? What happens with kind of this flip way, and you can see it in pricing schemas, in positioning and everything, is, you know, when you become public, you do live on a quarter by quarter basis. Sure. That's the game.
Yep.
And so you end up being in the wimpy place. And by the way, because your stock is, you know, it used to be pure stock options. It's not as bad if you're giving restricted stock. But because you're basically paying a game where you win a lot or nothing.
Right.
And so it doesn't pay to be moderately successful.
Right.
Because there's not that much difference between reasonable success and nothing. So you get into the wimpy strategy.
I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today.
Right. I'll gladly pay the price 2 quarters from now for the stock performance today. And you can see, by the way, if you take a look at the predictions in a lot of these SaaS companies and high value, high multiple companies, there are cliffs that they're promising in the last half of 2024.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing, and this is why you cannot confuse the stock market with your life or the world. If they don't hit their numbers in the second half of 2024, it's going to be because of what's happened over the last 12, 18 months.
Right.
Not because of what is happening then, right? And that's where we get ourselves into a lot of problems.
So we talked about the issues, the dangerous metrics, and what the problems are. What's the solution? What's the solve?
Jess, do you know what the difference between a mathematician, a computer scientist, and a data scientist is?
I don't.
So if you ask them all, what is 2 plus 2? The mathematician will go to a classroom, one of those giant freshman classrooms with 6 different boards, and we'll have this complex formula that in the bottom right corner, you'll be equals 4. The computer scientist will get on a supercomputer, create a generative AI algorithm, massive amounts of code to produce a report that is 7,000 pages long that at the end says equals 4.
Yep.
The data scientist will say, here, follow me. And they'll take you through a snaking hallway. You'll lose track of turns. They'll go through 4 doors. They'll take you into a skiff, soundproof. They'll check for bugs. They'll lean over and they'll say, what would you like it to equal?
I hope we don't have any data scientists listening to this episode.
In truth, all I did was I modified what's the difference between a mathematician, a computer scientist, and an accountant.
No, I'm aware.
The reality is, you know, what does the data tell us?
Yeah.
What do we want it to tell us? Right? It's lies, damn lies, and metrics. That's weird. So you got to understand the data. Understand the data. First off, understand the job of the data. Because by the way, if you want to improve your business, that is not the data you want to share with your board.
Well, and so on that note, and I think, and as somebody who deals with databases, who talks to clients about moving their systems over, like this is the part that really gets missed. The understanding of what's the data for. Like not even like we always get the question, can you report on it? Yeah, I can report on anything you want me to report on is usually my answer. But like, what are we really using this for? Like what's the goal?
Well, and it's worse than that. Because I could add an element of what would you like the report to tell you?
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%.
Like, do you want me to have the report tell you that everything's good?
Yep.
Right. Remember, we're talking to the company like we don't understand because our MQL model, and this is why MQLs have a bad name. I don't understand why, and I don't understand how MQLs became this controversial term. Well, we've generated 500 MQLs. We don't understand why we're not generating revenue.
Yeah.
Well, okay. What's an MQL? So
right.
Look, I don't think that I am in no way saying that you should provide reporting that lies to your board. But when you're reporting to your board, you're telling a story, you're providing support. And that's an important element. There's nothing wrong with that. It's an important element. At the same time, you've got to be looking at what's my flank like? What is it not telling me?
Yeah.
Like when I was a bench coach, at college, when I was coaching college baseball, my job was, if we were winning, my job was to figure out everything that could happen, that would cause us to be losing, and what should we do so that if suddenly the other team had a huge rally, our manager, who was also coaching third base, wouldn't have to start thinking about it. Like we'd already have a pitcher warming up. Like all those things are going on. And by the way, when we were losing, what would have to happen? It's like my job was to always think about what would happen to put us in the opposite of where we were.
Sure.
And it's why we won more games for the talent than we had any business winning. So understanding the model so that you understand how this fits. Look, I am not saying net revenue retention is not a good metric. It is a metric that I want to know. It is an important metric. But it is a metric that hides a whole lot. Right? It's also like the thing that I hate about public companies, we added 20,000 customers. Okay, 18,975 of them were on your free product. They signed up for a free product. Okay. Yeah. Well, let's not include that in the. Am I saying that doesn't matter?
No,
I don't know. I get it. It can be helpful.
Right.
But like, if I were an analyst and I wanted to cover, like, tell me how this segment is doing. Tell me how this segment is doing, and tell me how this segment is doing.
Yep.
And you know why they don't get that information?
Why?
Because the SEC doesn't require companies to provide that level of detail, so the company won't give them that information.
Right. Sure.
And by the way, do you know why the company won't give them that information?
Because they don't have to?
Because it doesn't help them with what they're doing right. Yeah. So do I want to know reality or do I want to hear the story? Right. So what you have to do is you have to understand where's the weakness. Stop building static models. Right. So we get a poll, Hillary Clinton, 67% chance that she wins the election.
Yep.
New York Times had it at like 98%. Why did they have that? They had it because this was based on hundreds of polls. And by the way, we weren't doing national polls. We were doing state polls. So we had 50 different groups of polling that told us this, right? Here's the problem. There's nothing dynamic about that model. Because one state is going to correlate to another state. It's like, if Georgia isn't telling you the truth, that doesn't mean that North Carolina is. Right? If Georgia, like if you're not sampling right in Georgia, you're probably not sampling right in North Carolina.
Sure.
Right. So what you're looking at, and by the way, you know what most data scientists do with outlier polls?
What? Throw them out?
They take them out of the model.
Yeah. Throw them out. Yep.
Now, should you take this poll that's just a complete outlier? By the way, if the polling is any good, you'll have an outlier.
Yeah.
right? Because of all the biases that happen. So what we end up having is these underlying elements that all correlate that. And the interesting thing here, and this is what happens when you have Pareto distributions, the cause creates the effect becomes the cause. So what you end up having is this really bad loop. And when it comes time to pay the price, you pay the price in a big way, right? What we've got to do is build non-correlating analysis. Like, I want to be looking at things that are looking at my business in different ways. I want the, like, we had somebody that we know well who shared what their target was. They wanted to significantly increase their website visits and significantly decrease their bounce rate. Yep. And I'm like, okay, I don't think you can do both of those at the same time. Right? That's a challenge.
Yeah.
But you know what? I like what they were thinking because, and the question I asked is, which is more important? Well, more traffic is important. Okay.
Right.
Let's grow traffic, looking to certainly not get any worse on bounce rate, and let's moderately improve our bounce rate. Then once we get to a critical mass of traffic, then let's focus on, right? But like, those are two non-correlating elements, right? That's part of what I mean by dynamic model. Remember, and we have a video on this. We'll put a link into it. It's the science of growth. I think it's got more to it than that, but we talk about this. I call it the growth waterfall. There's 3 acquisition processes. There's engagement acquisition. There's customer acquisition, and there's revenue acquisition. No one buys from you if they don't know who you are, if they're not engaging with you. I want my audience, I want my community to be growing. And by the way, I want my community, I want my audience, I want my engagement to be growing at a much faster rate. And by the way, when my audience and engagement rate goes down, and it will at some point, you can only be a hockey stick for so long. You can only be in the, right? Then I need to change my strategy and tactics. I need to, right? Customer acquisition. If my engagement rate is growing at a higher rate than my customer acquisition is growing, then I'm building more people. What I'm doing is I'm going to make growth easier for me in the future than it is today. By the way, you know what we call that when growing tomorrow is easier than today? Do you know what we call that? That's what scale is.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Scale is growing at lower costs, not just growth.
Yeah. Right.
Customer acquisition drives revenue acquisition. It is a waterfall. When one slows down, now look, when my customer acquisition starts to slow down and my revenue acquisition is growing greater than my customer acquisition, especially if we're dealing with large numbers, that is not a crisis. For a fair amount of time, I'm going to be able to drive more revenue, even though my customer rate has gone down, because I've got all these assets that I can begin to mine, right? And I'm going to grow. But if I'm not aware that my customer, like, okay, yeah, we're growing our revenue, but our customer acquisition, right? That can only happen for so long. So now my weakness becomes like, so while I'm doing that, I want to solve my 18-month problem. I need to be focusing on my underlying customer acquisition, right? So again, what am I going to report to Wall Street? I'm going to talk about net revenue retention. What I'm going to be talking about internally in our team and our internal initiatives, I'm talking about, hey guys, we're beginning to see some softness,
right?
And then you get into revenue acquisition. So there's 3 metrics that I love to use.
What are those?
The one which I have to attribute to Strategic Coach.
Yep.
It's called the largest check, spelled CHEQUE. Strategic Coach is a Canadian company. So if the largest check is not the largest check, CHECK, just so we're clear. Revenue per customer and revenue per employee.
And why do you like those metrics?
So here's what the first thing you should probably ask me is, what is largest check? Because no one that hasn't been through Strategic Coach.
What is sorry, I just
no problem.
Brushed over
I'm
that.
paying attention. For you. So largest check in the strategic coach language is largest check. Strategic coach is geared more to individual practitioners, financial advisors. I mean, they work with a lot of companies, et cetera, but it's the average of your 5 largest customers. So to me, this is, I mean, we look at quintile analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So the top 20% of your customers, the next 20%, the next 20%, the next one. Yep. We just shared with somebody that has more than 10,000 customers. And we were able to show them that if 40% of their customers stopped buying from them tomorrow, they wouldn't notice.
Right.
Right. Hey, wow, that tells me something.
Yeah.
What was interesting is the middle third, the 20%, they wouldn't notice it that much either.
Right.
But if you look at it as a total amount of business, it represented a meaningful amount of business.
Right.
The problem was they weren't managing it differently. So,
right.
Hey, here's a $30 million tranche of my $2 billion. But we could grow that 30 million to 100 million at lower costs if we treated it differently, right? And so what largest check is doing is, it's like if you're a larger company, I would probably call it the top, somewhere between the top 2 and 5%.
Yeah.
And by the way, you would be surprised. I have seen companies where the top 2% of their company generates 40% or more of their business.
Sure. Yeah.
Is that a bad thing? Not necessarily. But here is what I want to see. I want to see my upper level, right? And so sometimes you have to, there are places where I've actually carved it out because their top 10 customers are just huge. And that's not their place. That's not their sweet spot. So we kind of find where's the top of their sweet spot. And we want to see that number grow at a faster rate than their average does. Because what that tells me is I'm going into higher echelons.
Yeah.
I'm breaking into the next level because what we know about pricing is over time, what we get for what we do, we get less and less.
Yep.
So largest check says, are we growing at the top end of our business? By the way, that's important because that's what forces you to generate new capabilities. That's what helps to prevent value extraction. Yep. What happens is we kind of get into this market, growth becomes easy almost. Like it becomes super predictable and we're exploiting it, right? By the way, the term exploration, exploitation, and extraction comes from Roger Martin's work, Design of Business, etc. So if you want to get more on that, you can read that book. Remember, exploitation is equal. We're creating value. We're charging for that value. It's not forcing us to get better. What the largest check does is it says, are you getting better to generate higher revenues? Revenue per customer, that's an element of scale. And by the way, when I say revenue, it's important to say that gross margin, gross profit has a lot to do with this, right? And probably more to do with it than revenue. Like how much revenue are you able to run your business on? So if I'm selling a machine and I'm, I have a 25% margin. I sell you $1 million machine. I have to pay the vendor $750,000. That was I have $250,000 to run my business on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
I want to see that number come up because that means my people, which tends to be your highest cost. Mm-hmm. That means I hate the word efficient. We're generating greater value from our employees. Every time, like we're moving into higher gears, we're generating more velocity for effort, more juice for the squeeze, and revenue per employee. And by the way, revenue per employee, there are times where, and the last thing is we have ranges. If our revenue per employee gets too high, what that tells us is we're probably overworking it. We're probably running our machines at more than 100% capacity, and that's going to become a barrier to growth. So understanding where we are and what's happening, that's how you build a model to turn growth into manageable, predictable, and higher effect. Strong forecasting, this is the takeaway. Mm-hmm. Because everyone talks about forecasting.
Well, yeah.
Strong forecasting is the byproduct of good process.
And I think we've talked about that before and totally agree with that. everybody wants to go to forecasting first and don't realize that the process is what drives good forecasting. Cool. I got a couple of takeaways. So I really liked what you said about understand where the weakness is in the data. I think we're always looking for the answers in the data and not looking for where are blind spots, where are the holes, where are weaknesses. Understanding the data model. And then I liked the idea around building that non-correlating analysis. It's almost counterintuitive to what I see people frequently want to do. They want everything to correlate and connect to each other, and having kind of that broader picture is gonna eliminate those blind spots. So I thought those were the key takeaways.
You know what I say, Jess?
What do you say, Doug?
Just say no to shitty RevOps.
Till next time.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the RevOps Show. It's extremely important to figure out the job to be done and why you're looking at the metrics you want to look at before diving deep into the depths of gathering those metrics and utilizing them. There's always a purpose to the metrics. Or I should say, there should always be a purpose to the metrics that you are looking at and using. I also personally learned the new term of largest check, CHEQUE, not check as in CHECK, which is pretty cool. We should always be learning something new every day, right? Anyways, if you enjoyed this episode and want to keep up with us as new episodes come out, make sure to go subscribe to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We would also appreciate it if you rated the podcast. Let us know whether or not you're liking the episodes. If you have any questions you would like to ask Doug or Jess about bad metrics, email me at hannah@liftenablement.com or hit us up on X @DemoonCreator or LinkedIn at Lift Enablement. And until next time, just say no to shitty RevOps.